Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight, we bring you a gripping tale of love, deception, and ultimate self-discovery. We often build our lives on the foundation of what we believe is a perfect marriage. But what happens when a single glowing screen shatters that illusion forever? This is Nora's story. A woman who thought she had it all, until a ghost from her husband's past forced her to make the hardest choice of her life. Let's begin. Hi, my name is Nora Vance. I have spent most of my life in a picturesque, sleepy town where everyone knows your name. The streets are lined with ancient oak trees, and the brick houses tell stories of generations past. It is the kind of place where you feel entirely safe from the chaos of the outside world. My husband Julian and I lived in a charming sunlit cottage on the edge of town. For 2 years I woke up every morning genuinely believing that my life was a beautifully written fairy tale. Julian was everything a woman could ask for. He was tall, striking, with deep dark hair and a pair of expressive blue eyes that always seemed to soften whenever he looked at me. He had this radiant, effortless smile that could warm the coldest room. He worked as an accountant at a local firm. A smart, dependable man who always made time for me. Every single evening he would walk through our front door, pull me into his arms, ask about my day, and make me laugh with some silly office gossip. My friends constantly reminded me of how blessed I was. My closest confidant, Maya, would often sigh over coffee and say, "Nora, Julian is an absolute gem. Finding a man that attentive and handsome is like winning the lottery." And I would smile, feeling a deep wave of gratitude wash over me. We spent our weekends taking long walks through the countryside, experimenting with new recipes in our tiny kitchen, and filling our home with shared laughter. To the rest of the world and to me, our bond was completely unbreakable. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, cracks began to show beneath the polished surface. It started with small moments. I would catch Julian staring out the window when he thought he was alone, his face cast in a profound, heavy shadow of sadness. It wasn't just tiredness. It was a look of deep, unresolved longing. The moment he noticed me watching, a bright, rehearsed smile would instantly wash over his face, hiding the gloom. Whenever I asked, "Julian, honey, is everything okay? You seem somewhere else," he would always brush it off, kissing my forehead and saying, "I'm completely fine, Nora. Just thinking about some work projects." But his smile never quite reached those expressive blue eyes anymore. And then there was the phone. Julian's phone became an extension of his own body. It was always within arm's reach. He held it in his palm while we watched television. He placed its screen down on the nightstand right beside his pillow when we went to sleep. If I happened to walk toward the table to grab a glass of water, he would subtly but quickly snatch it up. When a notification buzzed, he would instinctively tilt the screen away from my line of sight. "Just a late email from the manager," he would mutter, a sudden tightness in his posture giving him away. I desperately wanted to believe him. I loved him with every fiber of my being. But a cold, unsettling knot began to form in the pit of my stomach. A quiet, persistent voice in the back of my mind kept whispering, "Something is hidden here, Nora. This isn't right." I tried to suppress it. I wanted my beautiful life to remain beautiful. But once doubt takes root, it is impossible to ignore. I told myself I was just being paranoid, a jealous wife creating monsters out of thin air. But the universe has a strange way of forcing us to face the truths we try so desperately to hide. And on one ordinary Tuesday night, the veil of secrecy was violently ripped away. What did I see on that screen? Stay tuned for part 2 to find out. It was a stormy evening when everything I knew about my marriage started to collapse. Julian was in the bathroom taking a long, hot shower. I was curled up on the living room sofa, trying to lose myself in a mystery novel. The house was quiet, save for the rhythmic patter of rain against the windowpane and the distant hum of the running water from the bathroom. Suddenly, a sharp buzz broke the silence. I looked over. It was Julian's phone, resting squarely on the wooden coffee table. My heart skipped a beat. This was entirely uncharacteristic of him. He had actually forgotten it. The phone vibrated a second time, and the screen illuminated the dim room with a bright, harsh light. Without even thinking, my eyes locked onto the display. A single name was blinking back at me, Elena. For a moment, the world stood completely still. The breath was knocked straight out of my lungs, and then my heart began to hammer violently against my ribs. Elena. I knew that name all too well. Before Julian and I ever exchanged vows, he had opened up to me about his past. Elena was his first love, his ex-girlfriend. They had been together for 4 turbulent years, a relationship that ended just months before he met me. Back then, Julian had looked me in the eyes and assured me it was over. He said they had completely drifted apart, that the chapter was closed, and that I was the only woman who held his heart. So why was Elena's name flashing on my husband's phone at 9 o'clock at night? My hands trembled as I stared at the device. A freezing wave of dread washed over me. I glanced toward the hallway. The bathroom door remained shut, the sound of the shower still echoing through the house. The phone screen finally faded into blackness, but the name Elena remained burned into my mind. I suddenly remembered a moment from our first year of marriage. Julian had been showing me a digital portfolio on his laptop when an old folder accidentally opened. A photograph of Elena filled the screen. She was undeniably striking. Cascading dark hair, piercing green eyes, and a confident, fierce smile that seemed to command attention. Julian had frozen for a fraction of a second before quickly closing the window, clearing his throat nervously. I had dismissed it back then as a harmless ghost of the past. Now that memory felt like a warning sign I had stupidly ignored. The beautiful story of my marriage was rapidly dissolving, replaced by a glaring, terrifying reality. My book slipped from my fingers, landing with a soft thud on the carpet. I couldn't read. I couldn't move. What did she want from him? More importantly, what was Julian hiding from me? The bathroom door clicked open, and Julian stepped into the living room, wearing his familiar flannel pajamas, his damp hair messy from the towel. He smiled warmly at me. Hey Nora. Everything good? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced my muscles to relax, crafting a fragile, hollow smile. I'm okay. I lied, my voice sounding incredibly distant even to myself. Just a long day. I think I'm just exhausted. I couldn't bring myself to say Elena's name. The fear of what he might say paralyzed me. Julian walked over to the coffee table, his eyes immediately finding his phone. I watched him like a hawk. His expression didn't flinch. Not a single muscle in his face betrayed his guilt. He simply slid the phone deep into his pocket without mentioning the missed call. Not a single word. That silence was a confession in itself. If it was an innocent call, he would have said something. The weight in my chest grew heavier, transforming from a subtle worry into a massive, suffocating anchor. He thought he had gotten away with it. He thought his secrets were safe behind a digital password. But curiosity is a fire that cannot be easily extinguished. What happens when the temptation to know the truth overpowers your morals? In the next part, I do the unthinkable, and my entire world shatters. The days that followed were an agonizing test of endurance. I pulled on a mask of normalcy every single morning. I cooked breakfast, I kissed Julian goodbye, and I asked about his day just like I always did. But internally I was bleeding. Every time Julian pulled out his phone, my stomach would twist into a painful knot. If I saw him smile slightly at a text message, a sharp pang of jealousy and grief would pierce my heart. Was he smiling at her? Was she the one bringing light back into his eyes? The days that followed were an agonizing test of endurance. I pulled on a mask of normalcy every single morning. I cooked breakfast, I kissed Julian goodbye, and I asked about his day just like I always did. But internally I was bleeding. Every time Julian pulled out his phone, my stomach would twist into a painful knot. If I saw him smile slightly at a text message, a sharp pang of jealousy and grief would pierce my heart. Was he smiling at her? Was she the one bringing light back into his eyes? One night, the insomnia became too much to bear. It was nearly 3 in the morning. Julian was asleep beside me, his breathing slow, deep, and peaceful. He looked so innocent in the moonlight, free of the guilt that was tearing me apart. Quietly, carefully, I slipped out from under the covers. My breath caught in my throat as I looked at the nightstand. There it was, his phone lying face down. My hand stretched out toward it, my fingers shaking so violently I was afraid I would drop it. A voice of dignity inside me screamed, "Don't do this, Nora. Respect your marriage. Trust your husband." But the voice of self-preservation was louder, roaring, "You deserve the truth. You cannot live in a house built on lies." My heart pounded like a tribal drum against my ribs as I picked up the cold metal phone. My palms were slick with sweat. I knew his passcode. He had used our wedding anniversary digits when he first set it up. I entered the numbers with a trembling thumb. The screen unlocked. I navigated directly to his encrypted messaging apps, and my stomach plummeted into a bottomless abyss. There it was. Elena. A massive, endless thread of text messages stretching back for months. Tears instantly blurred my vision, spilling over my cheeks as I began to scroll through the exchange. Elena's messages were filled with raw emotion. "Julian, I miss what we had. I think about you every single night." And later, "Please, can we just see each other? Just one drink. I need to see your face." My hand shook so hard I could barely keep the text in focus. But it was Julian's responses that delivered the fatal blow. He hadn't defended our marriage. He hadn't told her to leave him alone because he was a happily married man. Instead, he had written, "Elena, it's so complicated here. And we have to be incredibly careful. I don't want to cause a storm." In one heartbreaking text, he admitted, "I miss our conversations too. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." It felt like a physical blow to the solar plexus. I felt completely breathless, a burning sensation tearing through my chest. The man sleeping peacefully just inches away, the man who swore to cherish me forever, was maintaining a secret emotional life with his ex-girlfriend. He had reduced our entire marriage to a complicated situation. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him awake and demand to know how he could do this to me. But I just stood there in the freezing darkness of our bedroom, holding a glowing rectangle of betrayal, watching my heart break into a million unfixable pieces. Knowing a secret is one thing, but witnessing it with your own eyes changes you forever. When Julian announced he was heading out the following Saturday, I knew exactly where he was going. How far would you go to catch a cheating spouse in the act? Don't go anywhere. Part 4 takes an unforgettable turn. The text messages were an open wound that refused to heal. Every time I looked at Julian across the dinner table, I didn't see my husband anymore. I saw a liar. I saw a man who belonged to someone else. I needed definitive visual proof. I needed to see the reality with my own eyes before I made a move. The opportunity presented itself on Saturday morning. Julian poured himself a cup of coffee, avoided eye contact, and said smoothly, "Nora, I'm going to head out for a bit. An old buddy from college is in town, and we're meeting up to catch up on some things." My chest tightened. The lie was so effortless, delivered without a hint of hesitation. I kept my voice entirely neutral, matching his tone. "Oh, really? Which friend?" "Anyone I've met before." He snatched his keys off the counter, offering a fleeting, distracted kiss on my cheek that felt like ice against my skin. "No, just an old frat brother. You don't know him. I won't be too long, promise." The moment his car pulled out of our gravel driveway, a cold determination took hold of me. I wasn't going to sit at home crying. I ran to the bedroom, pulled on a nondescript dark trench coat, an oversized sun hat, and large black sunglasses. I looked like a character in a thriller, but this was my devastating reality. I jumped into my compact car and waited at the end of our street. When Julian's sedan drove past the intersection, I pulled out, maintaining a safe, multi-car distance behind him. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. He drove away from our quiet suburb and straight into the bustling center of the neighboring town. He bypassed the main corporate districts and pulled up outside a small bohemian cafe tucked away on a cobblestone side street. A quaint little place adorned with vibrant hanging flower baskets. Julian parked, glanced around casually, and walked inside. I parked across the street beneath the shadow of a large maple tree, keeping my eyes locked on the cafe's glass storefront. Minutes crawled by like hours. Then I saw her. She walked down the sidewalk with an unmistakable air of confidence. It was Elena. She was wearing a striking crimson dress that stood out vividly against the gray pavement, her long dark hair shifting in the wind. She looked beautiful, poised, and utterly destructive. She opened the door and walked into the cafe. Giving it a count of 60 seconds, I slipped out of my car, crossing the street with a racing heart. I approached the large glass window of the cafe, shielding myself behind a large display planter. I looked inside. There they were. Julian and Elena were seated at a secluded corner table right by the window. They were leaning in incredibly close, their world entirely shrunk down to just the two of them. Elena laughed at something he said, a loud, familiar sound, and naturally placed her hand flat against his forearm. And Julian? He was beaming. It wasn't the tired, strained smile he gave me at home. This was a radiant, ecstatic expression of pure joy. A look I hadn't seen on his face in over a year. He looked at her with an undeniable warmth, his blue eyes alive with a passion that had long died out in our home. The sight was a physical dagger to my heart. My worst nightmares weren't just true, they were standing right in front of me in broad daylight. Tears flooded my eyes, blurring the image of my husband sharing a soul-deep connection with another woman. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't watch another second. I turned on my heel and practically ran back to my car, sobbing uncontrollably. I drove back to our empty cottage, the engine roaring, fueled entirely by a dangerous mix of profound grief and boiling, unadulterated rage. The weeping, fragile wife died in that car ride home. By the time I walked through our front door, the sadness had transformed into a raging fire. When Julian finally walked into the house whistling a happy tune, he had no idea the storm he was about to face. The confrontation of a lifetime is up next in part 5. The drive back was a blur of tears and blinding anger. I could barely see the white lines on the asphalt. When I finally threw open the door to our home, the space felt completely foreign. It felt cold, vacant, and mocking. I paced the length of the living room like a caged animal, my breath ragged. My eyes landed on our framed wedding portrait hanging above the mantelpiece. We looked so radiant, so completely wrapped up in each other. Was any of it genuine? Or had I just been a placeholder while he secretly yearned for her? I waited. Every ticking second of the grandfather clock felt like an eternity. I rehearsed 1,000 different scenarios, 1,000 different insults, my chest heaving with a pain so deep it felt physical. Nearly 3 hours later, the sound of his tires on the gravel signaled his arrival. The front door opened and Julian strolled in, casually whistling a cheerful melody. He looked light, refreshed, and completely at peace. "Hey Nora. I'm back. The town center was packed today," he said with a bright, easy smile. Seeing him that happy, knowing the source of his joy was another woman, made something snap inside me. I stood perfectly still in the center of the room, my arms crossed tightly over my chest, staring at him with a look of absolute stone. I didn't say a word. Julian's smile faltered, his expression shifting to confusion. "Nora? What's going on? You look incredibly upset." "Upset?" My voice started as a whisper but rapidly escalated into a harsh, trembling shout. "Upset doesn't even begin to describe the absolute hell I am feeling right now, Julian." He took a step backward, raising his hands defensively. "Whoa, calm down. What happened? Did someone call you? Did something bad happen today?" "Yes, Julian. Something vile happened today," I screamed, the tears finally breaking through my composure. "You happened. You are the catastrophic thing that happened to my life." The words poured out of me like venom. "I saw you, Julian. I followed you to that flower cafe downtown. I saw you sitting there with Elena. I watched you look at her. I watched her touch you." Julian's face drained of all color, turning a ghostly, chalky white. His breath hitched. "Nora, what are you talking about? Don't you dare lie to me again." I shrieked, my body shaking with the sheer force of my agony. "Do not insult my intelligence by making up another pathetic excuse. I saw you laughing with her. You told me you were with a college friend. You looked happier with her than you have ever looked with me." Julian looked down at his shoes, running a frantic hand through his hair. The smooth, confident husband was gone, replaced by a profoundly guilty child caught red-handed. Nora, please just take a deep breath. It is completely different from what it looks like. How can it be different? I demanded, stepping closer to him, the tears streaming down my face. I saw the way you looked at her. You love her, don't you? After 2 years of marriage to me, you are still completely in love with Elena. Julian stood entirely frozen. He didn't offer a passionate defense. He didn't yell back, "No, Nora, you're the only one." His devastating silence stretched out between us like an ocean. Finally, he looked up, his own eyes glossy with tears. "Nora, please. You have to trust me," he pleaded quietly, his voice cracking. "It's incredibly complicated. I made a massive mistake, but I absolutely do not want to lose you. Please. Trust you." I laughed, a bitter, broken sound that tore at my throat. "You shattered my trust into dust, Julian. You lied to my face, you hid secret messages, you met your ex behind my back, and you expect me to just trust you." The argument raged on for what felt like hours. We shouted until our throats were raw, we wept bitter tears, but the air remained thick with unresolved betrayal. He kept begging for patience, claiming it was complicated, but he never once promised to cut her out of his life. He never once denied that he still had feelings for her. The perfect husband was gone, leaving behind nothing but a stranger with a divided heart. Just when I thought the situation couldn't get any more painful, the telephone rang the very next morning. It wasn't Julian calling. It was her. Elena wanted to meet face to face, woman to woman. What happens when the wife confronts the mistress? Find out in part 6. Things are about to get physical. The next afternoon my phone rang, vibrating against the kitchen counter. It was an unrecognized local number. I hesitated, a heavy sense of foreboding settling over me, before finally clicking answer. "Nora," a woman's voice spoke. It was smooth, controlled, and completely devoid of fear. "My name is Elena. Elena Miller. I think you know exactly who I am." My heart stopped, then began to race at a terrifying speed. "Elena. The woman from the cafe. The woman destroying my home. Why are you calling me?" I managed to say, keeping my tone as sharp and cold as steel. "We need to talk," Elena said calmly. "Just the two of us, without Julian caught in the middle. We owe it to each other to be entirely transparent." Every protective instinct told me to slam the phone down, but a sudden fierce rush of adrenaline swept through my veins. I didn't want to hide anymore. I wanted to see this woman up close. I wanted to look into the eyes of the person who was stealing my future. "Fine," I said, my teeth clenched. "Where and when?" "Let's meet at the same cafe downtown," she suggested smoothly. "Tomorrow at noon." The nerve of this woman was astounding, meeting at the very scene of their betrayal. But I didn't back down. "I'll see you there." The next day, walking into that cafe felt like marching toward a firing squad. My knees felt weak and my hands were visibly trembling, but I forced my posture straight, repeating a silent mantra of strength in my head. I pushed open the glass door and stepped into the warm, coffee-scented air. Elena was already there, seated at the exact same table by the window. She looked effortlessly beautiful in a tailored green blouse, her dark hair immaculate. She exuded an aura of complete control. When she caught sight of me, she offered a small, patronizing smile. "Nora, thank you for showing up," she said, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. I didn't offer a polite greeting. I didn't smile. I slid into the chair, leaning forward, looking her dead in the eyes. "Let's cut the pleasantries, Elena. What do you want to say to me?" Elena took a slow sip of her tea, choosing her words with calculating precision. "Julian is a wonderful man, Nora, but you have to understand something. He and I shared for incredibly deep years together. We built a history, a mountain of memories that don't just disappear because a marriage certificate was signed." "He tells me he is completely confused," Elena continued, her tone dripping with pity. "But I know him better than anyone. He misses our passion. He misses what we had." Then she delivered the final blow. She pulled her smartphone out of her purse, unlocked it, and slid it across the table toward me. "Look for yourself." On the screen was a gallery of digital images. Some were old, yes, but many were stamped with recent dates. Images of Julian and her smiling in parks, standing close together in the city, and one devastating photo of them holding hands across a dinner table just 3 weeks ago. It felt like a physical blade twisting violently inside my chest. "He belongs with me, Nora," Elena said, her voice rising with a proud, arrogant triumph. "He told me he only feels truly alive when he's with me. You're just a routine." A blinding white heat exploded behind my eyes. All the suppressed agony, the sleepless nights, the humiliation, and the rage from the past weeks surged to the surface all at once. I lost all control. I stood up instantly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Before she could even react, my right hand flew across the table, landing a fierce, resounding slap squarely against her cheek. The sharp crack echoed loudly through the quiet cafe. Elena's head snapped to the side, her eyes wide with total unadulterated shock. Her hand flew to her stinging, reddened cheek, her mouth agape. I didn't utter another word. I turned on my heel and walked out of that cafe, my entire frame shaking with a cocktail of terror, heartbreak, and primitive fury. I had never raised a hand to another human being in my entire life. The shock of my own actions sent me into a tailspin. But the real storm was waiting for me at home. Julian knew about the meeting. He let her come to me. When I confront him with the photographs, our marriage reaches its absolute breaking point. Don't miss part 7. I burst through the front door of our cottage, hyperventilating, my palms still stinging from the impact of the slap. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, hollow cavity of pure grief. Julian was pacing the living room floor, looking absolutely frantic. The moment he saw my disheveled appearance and my tear-stained face, he rushed toward me, his arms extended. "Nora! My God, what happened? Are you okay?" I stepped back, evading his touch as if he were radioactive. "Elena called me," I whispered, my voice cracked and frail. "She told me she was going to meet me. And you knew about it, didn't you?" Julian's arms dropped to his sides, his head bowing. That familiar, cowardly gesture of guilt. I tried to talk her out of it, Nora. I swear I did. I told her it was a terrible idea. I didn't want her to hurt you." Julian closed his eyes tightly, a tear escaping down his cheek, looking utterly exhausted and defeated. He stepped forward, desperately grabbing my cold hands in his. "Nora, please listen to me. Elena is twisting the narrative. She isn't telling you the whole truth." "Then tell me the truth," I sobbed. "Yes, we met. Yes, we talked," he pleaded, looking deeply into my eyes with a face full of genuine torment. It was a massive, stupid mistake. I was feeling suffocated, I was confused, and I handled it in the worst way possible. "I am so deeply sorry, Nora. I never wanted to inflict this kind of pain on you. I was weak. I was incredibly stupid." He squeezed my hands tighter, his voice dropping to an intense, desperate whisper. "But I do not love Elena anymore. Seeing her, it made me realize that the past is dead. It's over. I love you, Nora. Only you. You are my wife, my present, and my future. Please, you have to believe me." For a fraction of a second, his words sounded completely beautiful. A tiny, desperate part of my soul wanted to collapse into his chest, to accept the lie, and to pretend our beautiful fairy tale was still intact. I looked deep into his blue eyes, searching for a reason to stay. But as I looked closer, beneath the layer of his tears and his desperate apologies, I saw it. There was a shadow, a flickering moment of hesitation. When he pronounced the words, "I do not love Elena," his voice dropped a fraction too low, as if he were trying to convince himself. When he said, "I love you," the bright, certain light that used to define his gaze was completely absent. And then the text messages flashed in my memory. "I miss talking to you too. Sometimes." I remembered the ecstatic, carefree smile on his face at the cafe window. He was profoundly sorry that he had caused this mess. He was sorry he had broken my heart. I believed that. But he was still entirely in love with her. His heart was hopelessly divided between two women. A sudden, calm certainty settled over my soul. He was a man pulled between duty and desire. He might choose me out of guilt, but a part of his spirit would always be wandering back to her. And that kind of love, a fractured, pitying, compromised love, was entirely beneath what I deserved. My heart, which had been slowly fracturing for weeks, finally shattered into brilliant, unfixable pieces. The illusion was dead. I knew exactly what I had to do. There is a moment where the crying stops, and the clarity takes over. I looked at the gold band on my left finger, the symbol of a promise that had been completely broken. What happens when a woman decides she is no longer willing to be a second choice? The emotional finale of Nora's journey is next in part 8. With a steady, deliberate motion, I pulled my hands out of Julian's grasp. I took a step back, wiping the final tears from my face. My chest was aching with a profound sorrow, but my mind had never been clearer. "I believe that you are sorry, Julian," I said, my voice remarkably quiet, yet carrying a resonance that startled him. "And I truly believe you are confused. But I also know with absolute certainty that a part of your heart still belongs to Elena. And I refuse to live a life sharing a husband with a ghost." He panicked, his eyes widening in desperation. "No, Nora, please. That's not true. I am choosing you. I want to be here with you in this house. We can rebuild this." I simply shook my head, a sad, knowing smile touching my lips. "It's not about choosing me out of obligation or fear of a divorce, Julian. It's about what you feel in the quiet hours of the night. I saw your face when you were with her. I read the messages. I can see the truth in your eyes right now." I turned around, walking deliberately into our bedroom. I pulled my large suitcase from the top of the closet and threw it onto the bed. Julian followed me, his breath hitching, his hands trembling as he watched me open the zippers. "Nora, what are you doing? Please don't do this. We can go to counseling. We can fix this. I swear to you I will block her number. I will never speak her name again. I'll do anything you ask." I began taking my clothes from the drawers, folding them with steady, methodical precision. Each garment I placed into the suitcase felt like I was packing away a fragment of a life that no longer existed. It was excruciating, but it felt entirely necessary. "It's far too late for restrictions and promises, Julian," I murmured softly, not looking up. "The trust hasn't just been breached. It has been entirely demolished. I cannot spend the next 30 years of my life wondering every time your phone vibrates if she is the one on the other side. I refuse to live a life of suspicion." I packed the final layer of my things. Then I stopped. I looked down at my left hand. The gold wedding ring caught the afternoon sunlight, a beautiful, heavy reminder of a fairy tale that turned out to be fiction. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I slid the ring off my finger. It felt lighter than I expected. I placed it gently, soundlessly, on top of the wooden dressing table. Julian watched the movement, letting out a shattered, choking sob. "North, please. Don't leave the ring. Don't walk away from us." I zipped the suitcase shut, lifted it off the bed, and looked at him one last time. His face was entirely flooded with tears, his composure completely broken. He looked like a man who realized he had traded gold for glitter. But my heart didn't soften. "I have to leave, Julian," I said, looking him straight in the eyes. "Because I deserve to be someone's absolute first choice, not their convenient fallback option. I deserve a man whose heart is entirely whole when he looks at me." I gripped the handle of my suitcase, turned away, and walked out of the bedroom. I passed through the living room, past the mocking wedding portrait, straight toward the front door. Julian scrambled after me, standing between me and the exit, his hands gripping the door frame. "Nora, I love you. Please just give me one more chance to prove it." I looked into his eyes, seeing the boy I once loved, and the stranger he had become. "Goodbye, Julian." I gently but firmly moved past him, turned the brass knob, and stepped out onto the porch. I walked down the steps, threw my suitcase into the trunk, and drove away from the cottage. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. As the town boundaries faded behind me, the tears kept falling, but something entirely new began to bloom in the center of my chest. It wasn't happiness, not yet. It was a profound sense of strength. It was freedom. I am still young. My story didn't end today. Only a single toxic chapter did. I will grieve, I will cry, and I will face the lonely days ahead. But I will heal. I will construct a completely new life from the ashes. A life built on honesty. A life where I am loved entirely without conditions and with a whole heart. Sometimes the hardest thing we will ever have to do is walk away from a life we spent years building. But choosing your own worth over a dishonest love is the ultimate victory. Nora chose herself and in doing so, opened the door to a truly genuine future. Thank you for watching tonight's short film. What would you have done if you found those messages on your partner's phone? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more emotional stories. Until next time, stay strong and remember your worth.